To honor the Christmas holiday, I'm offering $15 off annual memberships to my streaming service, Dark and Twisted TV. You'll receive that discount for the first 2 years. Offer ends December 25th. Make sure to use coupon code Christmas 2021 at checkout. Join today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as it helps support the channel. This incident, or shall I say, nightmare, happened to me back in 1980 when people tended to trust people a lot more than they do today. Also, people were not as crazy as they are now. Hitchhiking wasn't considered dangerous by any means. Lots of people did it back in those days without any issues. One night, my girlfriend and I were coming home from a New Year's Eve celebration when an argument broke out between us. I had been drinking heavily, so I really don't remember the nature of the argument. It was probably over something stupid as usual. I ended up telling my girlfriend to let me out of the car, which at first she refused my request. We were in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, and we were miles from where our home was. If anything would have happened to me, she would have never been able to forgive herself. Anyways, our argument intensified, so she stopped the car and she let me out. At first, she didn't drive away. She just sat there on the side of the road as I began walking basically toward, well, nowhere. She yelled for me to get back inside of the car, but when I refused, she sped off. After walking for at least 45 minutes and still drunk off my ass, I decided to hitch a ride. At that time of morning, there were not many people on the road, so my chances of being picked up were slim, or so I thought. Before long, I saw headlights approaching from behind, then stopped right next to me. It was a dark, beat-up truck, and it sounded loud and unstable. Due to the tinting of the windows, I couldn't see the person who was driving. At first, I just kind of stood there, but after a minute or two, the person honked their horn, signaling me to get in. After entering the car, I saw that it was a man dressed in an all-black hoodie, and still I couldn't see the man's face because he kept looking forward. Then he sped off. As my eyes shifted downward, I noticed something around both of his wrists. They were handcuffs that had been cut. Obviously, this man had just escaped from jail or prison. Then he asked me where I was going. There was no way in this world that I was going to tell him to take me home now, because if he knew where I lived, he'd have my address, of course. I had this friend who just so happened to be a cop, so I gave him his address instead. On the way there, he tried to strike up multiple conversations, and even though I was trying to act normal and relaxed, I could tell that he could tell that I was nervous. So finally, we turned down the road leading to my cop friend's house, and when he saw a cop car sitting in the driveway, he panicked, threw me out of his truck, then sped off. Thank God I acted fast and came up with the idea to go to my cop friend's house, knowing that he would freak out when he saw the police car sitting out front. If I hadn't, no telling what could have happened to me. I might not have lived to be telling you guys this story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as it helps support the channel. This happened to me 2 years ago while I was relocating from Rhode Island to San Francisco. I was on the road in the middle of the night, and it almost seemed as if it was just me and the road since it was so early in the morning. To be honest, I kind of liked it because driving in the middle of the night have always gave me that feeling of serenity. Anyways, I was driving down the dark road and noticed a woman and a small child standing at the side of the road under the streetlight as the woman held her thumb out, obviously needing a ride. I pulled over, unlocked the doors, and told them to get in. The woman sat in the passenger side as the little girl got into the back. Then we were on our way. I asked the woman where they were headed, and she said, "Wherever you're going," which I thought was kind of weird. I didn't make a big deal out of it because I figured that she was just needing a ride into town, and from there she would call an Uber or something. After 10 minutes of driving, I tried to break the awkward silence by asking her about herself, but at the same time, trying not to pry. She told me that she had just left her husband because he had become abusive to her and her daughter, which was alarming to me because she looked old enough to be the little girl's grandmother instead of her mother. I mean, this woman looked to be in her late 60s or early 70s. Then I figured that maybe she just had adopted the child or something. I looked in the rearview mirror at the little girl and noticed she looked afraid and nervous. Then I told the woman that I had to stop off at the gas station ahead to get some gas. So I parked my car, then opened my car door. I asked the child if she was hungry and if she wanted me to get her some snacks or something, but she just kind of sat there looking downward and silent. So I went inside to get the snacks and pay for the gas when I noticed an Amber Alert on the screen of the TV that was behind the counter. And on the screen, 2 photos, one of the woman and the other of the child. Now, I know this sounds dumb, but instead of telling the attendant to call the cops, I left, got back in my car, and I planned on driving straight to the police station. But before I could drive off, there was a gun being held to the back of my head by the child. Then the woman told the little girl to keep the gun at my head while she went through my wallet. Then the woman told me to get the hell out of my car, pushing me out onto the concrete. She then sped off into the distance as I ran back inside, and I told the attendant to call the police. Hours later, the woman was arrested and the child was returned to her parents. Come to find out, the woman was the little girl's nanny and had kidnapped her. Her plan was to rob as many people as possible by hitchhiking while using the little girl as bait. Word to the wise: be careful the next time you pick up a hitchhiker, even if they have a small child. This happened to me last year while I was working the night shift at the local gas station up the street from where my wife and I lived. At that time of night, you basically have to drink cup after cup of coffee to stay awake due to the boredom that comes with the job. Around 2:30 a.m., I received a call from my wife in panic as she was crying so much to the point that I could barely make out what she was saying. After asking her to calm down and tell me what was going on, she told me that she was calling from the inside of someone's trunk. At first, I thought that she was joking because we were known as practical jokers trying to play pranks on each other for our new YouTube channel that we had just started. So when she told me this, I just kind of laughed and told her to stop playing around. She replied with this was not a joke and that her car had broken down on the road when she was on her way home from work, causing her to hitchhike because she was in the middle of nowhere. She told me that the hitchhiker was a guy that she had worked with and that he had become obsessed with her. I told her to remain calm and asked if she had any idea where they might be. She told me that she had no clue and begged me to please do something before he kills her. I was in complete panic, then ran outside, hopped into my car, then I sped off down the road looking for her in a frenzy. I had once saw this movie where a dispatcher told a person who was being kidnapped inside of someone's trunk to pull on the wires to the taillights to try to get the cops to pull over the car. So I gave her the instructions to do that. After trying for about a minute, she said that she finally was able to do it. I called the cops from my cell phone and I told them the situation. Then they told me that they were on it and that I should go home and they would be in touch. And then they said, whatever you do, don't try to be a hero and get yourself killed. Now, of course, I just wasn't going to stand by and wait for them to do something. So I took the law into my own hands. My wife had mentioned that the car was a dark gray Toyota, and that was the only description that she had had. So I kept a lookout as I continued to search. After searching frantically for about 30 minutes, lo and behold, there was a dark gray Toyota speeding down the road, skidding from lane to lane. And yes, there was one taillight that was out. I had always had a license to carry a firearm since we lived in Texas, so I removed it from the glove compartment, aimed it at the tires, and fired several shots, causing the car to spin out of control as it landed in a ditch. Then I exited my car and ran up toward the driver's window. The man had hit his head on the dashboard and was out like a light. So I grabbed his keys and got my wife out of the trunk as we embraced tightly. The police arrived minutes later and arrested the man. Till this day, my wife and I still have nightmares about it all.